Today on Seculo, Merry Christmas from the Biden administration. The gift, another 1099.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Seculo. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Seculo.
Let's ask you this quickly. Do you use things like Venmo or Zelle, which is built in a lot of times to your online banking, to send? It's basically like, well, in the past, it was like using cash if you were going to pay someone maybe a small fee, a handyman, or a tip, or you were splitting the bill at dinner, and instead of handing over 4 different credit cards, one person hands over the credit card, and then you Venmo the rest of the money to the person who paid with their credit card, so that it wasn't as confusing of a transaction for the waiter and for the restaurant. And this is something we've all gotten used to pretty much in our country. I think that certainly, it's the idea of, it's basically like having cash in a digital way where you can transfer quickly, and you don't have to go through the same processes of a wire transaction where you've got to put in all this bank debt on somebody and have all these different things. And those still exist for larger transfers, but we're talking about the small transfers. The IRS has now issued a regulation to start allowing them access to those transactions. It's $600 aggregate dollars a year. Now, before this regulation, just to put it into perspective, it was $20,000 and 200 transactions a year. So you had to be taking in $20,000 or more and 200 and more transactions. So that would be someone who was really using it for their business at a regular, very regular, and likely should be reporting on a 1099 that income. And that was no problem. No one had issues with $20,000 and 200 transactions. When you start dropping it to $600 in aggregate a year, and there's no transaction number, so it's just, You're talking about babysitters, handymen, and the confusing situation where the burden is going to be on you. If you were the nice guy who said, I'll just put it on my card, you guys Venmo me, you've got to make sure, I guess, to keep that receipt, which has been something that I know generations-wise we're used to digital everything. But, if a place doesn't offer that, you've got to keep that receipt because the IRS comes knocking, and you've done that a few times a year, and they want to know, where's that receipt, or to prove that you weren't just getting paid by these people, free cash from these people, instead of a reimbursement, and all the record keeping that comes with it. But it'll also allows the IRS right back in. They're not getting into your bank account yet, but they're getting very close.
No, what they've done is, and they're doing this through rulemaking, so this isn't a law, this is a regulation they put in place. So that's number one. Number two, what it allows, and this is what we have to be very concerned with, is it puts, like you just said, Jordan, the onus now is on the taxpayer. If we all go to lunch and I put it on my credit card and then you all pay me back, and there's going to be 1099s created, and I've got to show now, no, that wasn't income. That was just reimbursement of money I laid out. They're just complicated. This is not going to increase revenue of any significant proportion, yet the government gets in. We're going to get into this, what we can do about it. At the same time, we are on guard for the bill that has both a revocation of the Lerner Rule, which is the one that prohibits targeting of conservative organizations, and also changes the election law scenario between state and federal control. That's going to be picked up in January. We just got word on that. We want to talk to you at 1-800-684-3110. Your comment on all of this, elections, election integrity, the issue of the IRS in your business. We're going to talk about all of that. But also, we don't want you to forget, so 1-800-684-3110. But don't forget to support the work of the American Center for Law and Justice. We are literally down to 8 days in our matching challenge. These are the most important 8 days of our year right now.
Yeah, support our work at aclj.org. Right on the homepage, you'll see the donate button, their matching challenge, and you can be a part of it. You can decide it's a one-time donation. You can make it a recurring donation. You will still be part of the match either way. And whether it's $10 or $100 or $500, it is all so critical to the ACLJ, as we're a grassroots-funded organization. Donate today at aclj.org. Be part of our matching challenge. We'll be right back on Secular.
The IRS has finally released a list of political groups it has scrutinized.
I received this letter with a bunch of questions
that we all knew immediately was not right.
And at that point, I knew I was a target.
Tea Party groups say they're being targeted by the Internal Revenue Service, and they're enlisting the aid of the American Center for Law and Justice.
They were trying to shut groups down that they disagreed with.
I'll never forget what Jay said when he said, "We've got your back and we're going to be taking care of this." And I felt like the weight of the world was off of my shoulders.
Ms. Lerner, why would you say Tea Party cases were very dangerous?
The IRS started targeting Tea Party groups more than 3 years ago.
Never before has the federal government tried to muzzle everyday Americans solely because of their political view.
You don't expect this kind of intimidation.
It was something that no one could believe our government was even capable of doing.
They have way too much power and no accountability.
They got caught. Federal government got caught.
It is worth any battle to preserve our liberty.
We were fighting the United States of America at this point.
It took 3.5 years of litigation to get there. Our team did a fantastic job of litigating this, and the end result is not only an acknowledgement of the wrongdoing, but also a complete change of policies.
My 9-year-old, when she grows up, she can say, hey, my dad did it. I can do it too.
In the future, if any group feels like they're being targeted, ever, they can go to federal court and bring our case, and that's not going to take 5 years. That's going to take 5 minutes.
They stood up for us. They fought for us.
It wasn't just the knowledge base and the experience, it was the belief.
We only persevered because the ACLJ was there.
Join us online at the American Center for Law and Justice at aclj.org.
All right, welcome back to Secular. We are taking your phone calls too on this. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions about how this is going to impact them, especially small businesses, independent providers, handyman services, babysitters, your daughters, your granddaughters, and grandkids who might, mow the lawn in a neighborhood. If they're taking in a year over $600, so $601, then they will be subject to, the IRS will be able to look at those transactions, and then subject to like 1099s. Then you've got people who are just using these services a lot of times as reimbursements, so that you don't have to. I've done it with golf, I've done it with restaurants, where I'll put it down, put it on my card, or somebody else puts it on their card, and you say, okay, I'll just Venmo you. Or also, it can be used as tipping. But again, small dollar transactions is what the IRS is trying to do. And they're claiming this is about revenue.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the revenue generated by this, because of how much work they'd have to do to really track this down, it's not. This is about spying on you.
No, here's the thing, and I'm going to Andy first and Harry. And Andy, this is another ability of the federal government through rulemaking, through regulation, actually, to put in place not a law, a regulation, which they're saying is closing a loophole. But the reality is, if someone's getting money from babysitting, if that's what they do for a living, not likely they're going to even meet the federal income tax threshold. But now all this paperwork and IRS reporting is being generated. Where this goes is not a good sign.
No, it's a terrible sign. But what it is, as Jordan alluded to earlier, it's an attempt again by the IRS to snoop into the activities of even the smallest of us taxpayers on the planet, in the United States of America, trying to look into our lives, trying to make a determination of what money, little inches and dimes and dollars they can possibly accumulate. But it's an attempt to snoop through rulemaking and not congressional action. But it is an attempt, again, to interject themselves into our daily lives by giving us 1099s, saying that's income to you, and putting the burden on the taxpayer, on the individual citizen, on the person like who Jordan says, who picked up the tab at the restaurant, but who gets money from the other people that just paying him off or her off, to have to show that that's not income, that that's simply reimbursement. But in the larger picture, it's the United States of America through the Internal Revenue Service which is the great octopus of the federal government getting into our daily lives for tax that may amount to what a year? $18, $50, $100? That's what bothers me.
Well, I look at people who are retired, who are listening right now, who again are kind of outside the regular tax system now because it's Social Security, retirement is set up this way now. It's like it's allowing the IRS to get into people's transactions that they really before had no reason to. So this wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for them to have revenue on. I think that the really what they're trying to go at is the retired and people who are just scraping together a living who would not be subject to any federal income tax.
Meet the threshold for income tax.
Right.
That's what makes no sense.
Plus,
here.
the retired people who are outside of the regular system as well.
Yeah. So, Harry, I'm trying to figure out what the real impact of this is. And if I'm a taxpayer, which we all are, you'd be concerned about this.
Absolutely. So plain and simple, this is simply another IRS espionage attempt. And it's led by individuals who are related, at least in part, to James Comey, the failed FBI director.
At least philosophically.
Philosophically. The IRS claims that this initiative is designed to bridge the tax gap of billions of dollars from a lack of taxpayer compliance in reporting. That's a nonsensical claim because those who are specializing in hiding money from the IRS know how to escape IRS burdens and requirements. They can hire tax accountants. They can hire lawyers. They can engage in moving money overseas. So at the end of the day, the burden of this new reporting requirement will be felt largely on the middle class, small business owners, handymen and handywomen. And so the lower middle class in the United States and the middle class will now run the risk of doing what? Overpaying the IRS because the IRS will in some respects insist that they have made money when simply they have received reimbursement from their fellow citizens. I think at the end of the day, the Biden administration really does not care about raising funds. They care about increasing the burdens on the American people because at the end of the day, it's all about control. And it's all about a backdoor way of advancing, at least in small part, the Build Back Better program through regulations as opposed to through statutory enactment. It's important to keep in mind, for instance, that there is a Build Back Better program in Canada. There is a Build Back Better program in Haiti, in the United Kingdom. Throughout the world. So at the end of the day, I think the American people should be very suspicious of this move by the IRS. It's only one part of a larger puzzle.
Yeah, they're not ready to go yet. Janet on Facebook wrote in, I feel like this just creates a major headache for everyday Americans with the false assumption that the majority, right, that is the assumption is that you're not reporting your correct income and you're using apps which track everything you do. So that reasoning is also ridiculous because at the end of the day, at any time, if you were someone who is, you're in the tax bracket, so you're paying income tax. I mean, these are apps that have every transaction you made. If they ever needed that,
they can get it.
They can get it. If you're someone who is a regular taxpayer, I feel like they're just going after people who they can't go after under their current system because they're not making the income threshold or they're retired. They're not making the threshold that way. So on the front end, it's kids. Are also just people who are immigrants trying to work and put some money together. And I feel like what this will do, once more people figure this out, is it just pushes back to a cash system, which we've moved away from because of it was convenient. But this actually becomes more inconvenient. Yeah. So you start carrying around cash again.
No, I think this is
for $20 and stuff like that.
It's the entire problem. And I think the caller we have really enlightens exactly what the problem's going to be.
Yeah, Simon in Minnesota on line 1. Hey, Simon, welcome to Secular. You're on the air.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
As soon as you mentioned Venmo right away, it got my attention because we have a son in the Army, and we went to visit him over Thanksgiving, and right after that, he had a major break on his car, a breakdown. So we just went and Venmoed him the $1,500 to get that repaired. But then he's got a big Christmas bonus coming, and that's coming back. And then he was just going to Venmo that back, so he's got the money. Now, how do I try to show them that that's not income? It's just money given back. That
First of all, this is exactly the problem. We've got now at least two reportable transactions, neither of which are actually taxable. And first of all, you could have gifted the money to your son and then he could pay you back, and it's not really, you could lend it to him and he pays it back. So you're going to have to show that it came in, that you lent the money to your son. You're going to have to probably add that to your,
get the receipt
from your son. It's ridiculous.
I mean, that's interesting. This is the point right here.
It's so ridiculous.
Simon
this is a perfect example of why
would
this
not
is
get
ridiculous.
the receipt. It would be his son. So now he's got to go to his son to get the receipt to keep for his records.
But the son has to keep. Records because he will be getting.
Yeah,
this is Andy. Really quickly here. This is Simon's question. Is exactly the problem.
Jay, this law, this regulation is based upon the assumption that the people of the United States of America are thieves, liars, and cheats, and you can't trust them, and we have to supervise them and engage in espionage. That's the basic assumption here, that we have a dishonest population.
I mean, Simon's call was perfect because this is exactly what you don't want the federal government doing.
No, absolutely. And this is why, we exist. There is a way. We've already looked at this. So, these regulations go through. I don't think the current Congress, now the makeup right now with the House Pelosi, but we all know that is likely coming to an end. Regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on, you see this massive wave of retirements on the Democrat side of the aisle. What does that mean? Well, you could go in legislatively and take this power away from the IRS. So we're going to, as we move forward with this, you kind of keep track of these. You put this down. You say, okay, this is something that a Republican Congress has got to fight back against. And they're going to have to negotiate. If they come in, a Republican Congress, they may have to negotiate with the Biden administration. He's got the veto power for a couple of years. But you can legislatively fix these power grabs by the IRS to figure out ways they can get inside your accounts that they normally would not be able to do. And again, it's kind of it's accusatory position that all Americans are somehow bad and not doing what they're supposed to do and not following the law. Again, this is a reason to support the work of the ACLJ. We fought the IRS. We have no issue fighting the IRS again, but they are trying to change the rules on how to target conservative groups again as well, saying that you can target for political purposes. This is a time you've got to support the ACLJ. Our work is very critical to protecting your rights. ACLJ.org. Be part of the matching challenge, the most important month of the year. Final 8 days. Donate today at ACLJ.org. We'll be right back.
From splitting the dinner bill to helping pay for gas, cash apps like Venmo, Zelle, and PayPal make for paying for certain expenses a breeze. But a new IRS rule will require folks to report cash app transactions to the feds.
People are using Venmo, PayPal, or Zelle instead to pay for their services. Well, now the IRS wants to know about it. Starting January 1st, providers have to report gross business payments of more than $600 to the IRS.
A business is defined, if your goods or services have been exchanged.
The previous threshold was $20,000. Well, now the IRS wants to know about anything over $600. Who are they going to be looking at?
From $20,000 to $600, I'm just trying to figure out what kind of consumers they're trying to, sort of catch.
It's part of the Biden American Rescue Plan. The IRS wants to know about business transactions over $600 being paid through by cash apps like Zelle and Venmo.
The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 passed back in March, and it modifies the IRS reporting requirements for transactions using these cash apps. When the new rule takes effect on January 1st, the apps will notify the IRS when payments top $600, triggering a 1099 form to be sent out.
This does not change the tax law as it relates to the taxability of income, meaning that if you receive income or payments through Cash App or Venmo as it relates to your business, you still would need to report it on your taxes just the same.
The IRS plans to take a closer look at Cash App business transactions more than $600. If you use Cash Apps for personal use, you won't be impacted. But where the line gets blurry is when the self-employed use the same Cash App account for personal and business transactions.
to Secular. If you want to talk to us on air, the number is 1-800-684-3110. You call that now. That's 1-800-684-3110. So we're starting to see, because of the failure of Build Back Better, we're starting to see the Biden administration is under a lot of pressure from progressives and liberals to use executive authority, to at least try and use executive authority and the regulatory process to implement some of those programs. And one of those programs was an increase in the size of the IRS budget, $80 billion and 87,000 new IRS enforcement agents. So that didn't pass in Build Back Better, what Joe Manchin did, so it's dead for now. But now we've seen the IRS trying to backdoor ways to increase. What they're saying is increase their revenue. I think it's twofold. They may want more money because it's an agency that is not well run and does not really work in 2022 as we're about to reach. I mean, it's still run off like typewriters. But at the same time, they're going to be able to just get into everybody's accounts, because Venmo, as someone wrote in, they used it for $3 to pay for something at any farmer's market.
But don't worry, if they did that a lot of times, it equals $600. You'll be involved.
Right. I mean, I think most people who use these apps are using more than $600 a year.
Yeah, so we've got that. So our team's going to get on top of this and see what we can do legislatively to undo this at the first of the year. Now, H.R. 1, the Senate version now is Chuck Schumer saying he is going to move that right after the first of the year. He wants to scrap the legislative filibuster to do it. This will first eviscerates the integrity of the election process because it takes out of the state control and puts basically everything centralized in the federal government. That'll include mail-out ballots to all residents, banning states from implementing any voter ID measures, and legalizing ballot harvesting, which is always inviting fraud. Jordan, explain to everybody what that is.
So, I mean, ballot harvesting is you go into a nursing home, and you basically utilize a law that allows you to, if someone asks you, they need help filling out their ballot, you can basically tell them who to vote for. So you could say, or for a population which may be new to voting, so immigrants who have just become U.S. citizens who are not as up to speed on our political process and the different parties. And so that's one way of harvesting. The second way of harvesting is putting the boxes out. So there's actual in-person harvesting where you are actually telling the people who to vote for and using a law like, well, they asked for assistance. And that is ripe for abuse. Think about a nursing home situation where people, again, they are there for a reason, and then they're being manipulated by people. And I will just tell you, one issue is that the left does this very well, and conservatives, they kind of don't think it's the right thing to do, so they don't do it.
Yep.
The second is the drop boxes.
Yeah,
remember the battle over, they didn't want cameras on the drop boxes? Why? I mean, if really it was just a fair
literally a drop box
where you put your ballot in, why were you so concerned about this being watched by camera? Because there was nothing good going on with this. That's not how the process should work.
That's
the
not what
mail-in
the
ballots
elections are meant to
was
be.
absurd.
Right.
Because we're not Oregon in every state. Oregon decided as a state, we are going to use this system. We have a population. We think this will work for us. But they put in all the safeguards in. Last election cycle, it was, anytime if you moved a couple times and it's been more than the 10 years, or they haven't gotten rid of the voting rolls, like a lot of blue states who don't go through those processes, you're getting multiple, as I call them, live ballots. Live ballots, not a request for a ballot, but an actual ballot to choose President of the United States. And then, we don't want cameras on those boxes. I mean, it's just, they try to do it in the sense of it's voter intimidation to have voter integrity. And I think that what you have to cut through in this is not about race. It's not about voter intimidation. It's about integrity. If you're going to move to systems and modernize voting, and you're going to allow for these kind of mail-in or drop-off, then you must have the security. And you can't buy in that putting a camera on the box is somehow racist. Why? What are you doing that you don't want people to be able to see, law enforcement to be able to see?
You're not going to be able to read the ballot. I mean, Andy, you said these ballot harvesting places with the boxes were lined up on like Peachtree Street in Atlanta.
Yeah, Jay, they were lined up along Ponce de Leon Avenue in Atlanta, which I've traversed for 47 years plus, next to newspaper boxes. Remember where you put a nickel in and got a newspaper out? Well, next to it was a ballot harvesting box.
Maybe $1.50.
And there was no one there. There was no camera there. There was no one guarding it. There was no one watching it. You just went in and dropped your ballot in, supposedly your ballot, and then someone came and harvested the ballot in the manner that Jordan described.
So this is where there is no election integrity. And we've been filing briefs. We're going to continue to do that. We have an email going on that today. But, Harry, when you look at the situation of voter ID, something that basic, why would we centralize this in the federal government?
Well, we would centralize it in the federal government because the federal government wants to control it, number one. Number two, the Democrats want to make sure that they win every future election. And so they would like to do as much as possible undercover. And so they are opposed, for instance, to virtually every state voter integrity measure, even though every single country virtually in the world has, for instance, voter ID. But the Democrats are claiming somehow that voter ID, when it happens in the United States, is racist. I think at the end of the day, the Democrats are consumed by their own incoherence.
You know, all of this points to what your support of the ACLJ allows us to do around the globe, but here in the United States. And this gives you a sense of it. Not only this broadcast that comes to you every day, but all the work that we do around the globe. We've got an email that's out right now that's outlining exactly what we're doing on things like election integrity and the IRS trying to revoke the Lerner rule, which we won in federal court. And none of that happens without your support. And we're in a matching challenge campaign, and we're down to the last basically 8 days here. Is it 8 or 9? 8 or 9. I think it's 8. So these are our biggest days. This is the biggest days of the year for us right now. And your support, is absolutely critical. And Jordan's going to let you know exactly how this matching challenge works. But I want to encourage you, if you've not yet donated to the ACLJ, this would be the time to do it at aclj.org. Really important that you do it.
Yeah, so it's a simple matching challenge. We have a group of donors, and they agree for these critical months of the year to match the donations that come through. So that means that you have to take the initial action for them to match. So while they'll match the $500 donation, someone had to make that $500 donation to trigger that match. The $20 donation, a $5 donation. And you do it at aclj.org. Now, when you're at aclj.org, you'll see right on the top of the homepage, Matching Challenge, the donate button, and you can do it all online. In fact, we're coming up on a break in a minute. You would be able to do all of that and do your donation well before we come back from that break. Even if this is only a minute break we're about to come up here, you could do it that quickly. But you can also choose there, and we get this question a number of times throughout the year, you can choose there to make a recurring donation. So if you want to make a $25 automatic donation monthly to the ACLJ, you click that box. You will still be part of the matching challenge this month for that $25 that you donate today. And you can set up it recurring. You can also do a one-time. If you want to, maybe you already have recurring, but you want to make a larger end-of-year donation, you do that. You can do that and still be part of the match. So this is, again, I just can't repeat enough how important it is for our work at the ACLJ. And we try to always explain, it's more than this broadcast. It's bigger than the broadcast. It's bigger than the radio show. And I think that those of you who support us financially do understand that. And you can certainly see it at aclj.org. So I encourage you to be part of this matching challenge. Donate today, aclj.org. Second half hour is coming up.
One of the practice areas that we've been able to develop is Freedom of Information Act requests, or FOIA requests.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
Government agencies acting out of control.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
It is your statutory right as an American citizen to have access to documents that reveal how the government is functioning, how your government is functioning.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. They can't do what they were doing before.
They've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
How do we know? Because our FOIA litigation got that document.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
It's all because of you. And you can doubly impact your donation today at aclj.org. Go online and donate now.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Seculo. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, welcome to Sekulow, second half hour of the broadcast. So just to let you know, coming up live, Rick Grinnell and Mike Pompeo are going to be joining us to get into some foreign policy issues as well as we finish out the year and what's going on in a world which seems very dangerous, even outside of the COVID issue. A world where you see Chinese aggression in Taiwan, Russian aggression in Ukraine. I mean, threat of the use of nuclear weapons on Russian state TV. So I paid for this. Is again, was not like a private news organization. It's Russian owned, and they're talking about this. So we're going to talk about these issues as well, and how it affects us here at home. I know that Rick has got a new piece up on energy independence and how we've given this energy independence away through these climate accords, and we're also punishing many allies. Poland, Vietnam, India, Japan, barred from receiving U.S. energy support under new regulations by the Biden administration. And so, again, that affects you too, because those are countries that you would rely on to work with you if there were any kind of conflicts, or also for national security purposes year round. And you suddenly cut them off from, the energy support, and they're in trouble. They're scrambling, but they're also not as, it's like these administrations, what they are trying to do is dismantle the U.S. superpower, and take us, and it's quickly happening, where you start seeing a China who can realistically say, a country where most people are living in very rough conditions that we would consider the U.S., but they can actually say that we see ourselves as the next superpower. In the not like 25-year future, like in a few years, that they will be the dominant power. And that allows the Russians also, who don't necessarily think they'll be the dominant power, but they'll be ignored by the Chinese, will let them go on what they want to do in their region of the world, to also take extraordinary actions that they would not do if they really feared the United States of America. So we'll be getting that into this second half hour of the broadcast.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, but as we get ready to have Rick Grinnell and then former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, of course, Rick was the Director of National Intelligence and Ambassador to Germany, I wanted to take just a moment here, as we are getting near the end of the year, to say we have people like Rick and people like Mike Pompeo, Rick Grinnell and Mike Pompeo, because of your support of the ACLJ. And without it, we don't get that kind of expertise, which helps us around the globe and helps you around the globe. And the fact of the matter is, and I do want to share this, we did a campaign for 2021 called ACLJ Now More Than Ever. And part of that Now More Than Ever was bringing on 2 members. I mean, think about this, everyone. 2 members of President Trump's cabinet work with the American Center for Law and Justice in the most senior of positions. 2 members of the president's cabinets are part of the team at the ACLJ. So when we are countering some of the initiatives of the current administration, we are doing that with the expertise of a former Director of National Intelligence and a former Secretary of State, who also happened to be the former Director of the Central Intelligence Agency as well, CIA and Secretary of State. So when you look at the background of who we're dealing with and the kind of staff and team we've been able to assemble, without your support, it doesn't happen. And, of course, you hear our experts every day on this broadcast, and we bring you this broadcast every day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Your support of this organization makes that difference. I want to encourage you. Jordan's going to explain the matching challenge to you. Do it right now if you haven't already done so. If you have, thank you.
Yeah, so here's what you do. We have a group of donors. They say we'll match the donations, but this is where you come in. They don't match unless you make the initial donation. So while they're ready to match your $25, $30 donation, so where you double the impact this month of what you donate, because you are triggering that match. Each time a new donation comes through at aclj.org, you're triggering that matching challenge. So that matching donor says, okay, that $25 came in, we're matching that. It's now $50. The $200 comes in, we're matching that. It's $400. And these are critical months that we set this up. So whether you want to set up a recurring donation or you want to make a one-time larger donation, this is the time to do it because you're doubling the impact of the donation. Again, it's aclj.org. Donate today. We'll be right back.
We hear something. When we're concerned about an issue, we don't just talk about it. We do something about it. And that goes to our Government Accountability Project.
The things that are important are knowing where to look and who to look at. What we're trying to do is get information that we, the people, are entitled to. We sort of call them puzzle pieces because we don't know which ones we're going to need in the long run. But you gather all the puzzle pieces together, and then you start to put them together to uncover the truth, really.
The Freedom of Information Act, that's a statute that allows us to get information from the government. Starts with a letter from our offices in Washington to these agencies. And it says, give us this information on these topics. And generally, they don't. And then we go to court.
We go through a series of lengthy negotiations back and forth about what they'll give or what they won't give. We may get tons of information that's redacted, and we have to then go back and say, you redacted too much. We can't really find out what you're giving us because it makes no sense. So it goes through a process of litigation.
That is how you get information, and that office is going to be more active now more than ever.
The ACLJ has been extremely active in vigorously seeking to hold these bureaucrats accountable. We have filed hundreds of FOIA requests. We have received over 20,000 pages of documents in our litigation.
How was our government operating? What were they driving at? What was their agenda? What was their motive? And I will tell you, I mean, sometimes the picture that it paints is one of terrific abuse.
You're finding a nugget in a gold mine. Occasionally you'll come up with something that is really a bombshell, but you have to persist in doing it, and that's what we do.
That's a little bit of what we do through our Office of Government Accountability, and of course that comes under our Office of Government Affairs. So your support of the ACLJ supports all of that.
Seculo, and we are taking your calls too, 1-800-684-3110. But we have joining us in a moment Rick Rennell.
He's available now by phone.
By phone. Rick, of course, is our, and we were talking about this the first half hour, our senior advisor for national security and foreign policy. So it's not just someone who comes on the broadcast to, it's like that, or a contributor on TV that you see, but it's part of our team. And it's got a piece up that we haven't gotten to yet on the broadcast about the Biden administration abandoning America's energy independence, but also how this is affecting our allies. So, Rick, I appreciate you joining us today. Just right off the bat, I think that your piece says it starts with the idea of, quote, we will oppose. And it puts our allies like Poland and Vietnam, India, Japan, barring them from receiving U.S. energy support. Explain that to people.
Well, what's really shocking about this latest move from the Biden administration is that they're opposing certain forms of energy independence. And it's unbelievable when you think about telling other countries that they can't use coal, they can't this, oil, and they can't use certain natural gas types. Now, what's really remarkable about this is that many countries have to have a mix of energy. They can't just have wind and solar. They need to have coal because they've got plants that are using coal for 20 years. They've got a source of coal, so it's cheap. Look, we all get that we want to improve the environment and be sensitive to the environment, but cutting energy and energy projects from other countries simply because it's a coal project or it's an oil project is really remarkable, because they're going to find themselves in the situation like California, where they have rolling blackouts, rolling energy crises, simply because the Biden administration is demanding that these other countries do more wind and solar projects. Otherwise, we're not going to help them fund these projects.
Yeah, Rick, you also said in your piece that the new policy not only impacts our foreign partners, as we just talked about, but also penalizes U.S. energy companies.
Look, one of the breakouts of the last 5, 6, 7 years in the United States in terms of a transformation of the energy industry is that we have become, for the first time ever, an energy exporter with liquid natural gas. Now, think about that. We've been on Middle East oil for so long here in the United States that during the Trump administration, when we moved to explore natural gas, which we have plenty of access to here in the United States. That transformed our economy. It transformed the industry. It allowed us to not purchase as much Middle East oil. It let us grow this clean energy source, which is natural gas. And it's been an explosion for American jobs. We've had so many companies grow and be able to begin to sell overseas. Certainly, we know Sempra Energy, for instance, has a big, huge, it's an American company out of California. They have a big operation in Mexico now, creating jobs both in the U.S. and in Mexico. This is an amazing opportunity for American companies, but yet this latest move from the Biden administration is that we won't be able to fund projects overseas with our partners that have certain forms of liquid natural gas that are not clean enough. And that's what the Biden administration is labeling things. If they're not clean enough, if they don't meet a standard, then we're not even going to fund them. But, you know, what's really shocking, Jay, is that just take a country like Germany. Germany talks a big game about clean energy and wanting to have, a climate policy that is always geared towards clean energy, but they have coal plants. They use coal energy. And so does the United States. So we have to be able to be smart about not cutting off these countries cold turkey, so to speak, just simply because the energy source that they have available to them is not clean enough.
And they're going to have to find it elsewhere. And I would assume, Rick, they're going to be looking towards the Chinas and the Russias of the world to find it. And these are not countries that want to necessarily be reliant or doing business at that level with Russia and China. But if you force them into doing it, they've got to keep the lights on. They got to keep the plants on.
What you just said, Jordan, is totally key. Because it's not like when we tell them that we're not going to fund coal plants or oil plants. Yeah, they're not going to stop using coal and oil. They have to use it in their energy mix. And so it's a false choice that the Biden administration is giving them, because it's really not going to cause them to do anything but look to Russia and China for coal and oil. And our products are much cleaner. I mean, there is a truth to cleaner coal. That is the truth. If you use technology, you can create cleaner coal. And so I think that what we have to do is take these countries where they are. What is their energy mix? How are they getting their energy sources? Yes, we want to diversify them, but we need to understand that they are going to go for the cheapest energy source for their people, and that only makes sense.
You know, we were energy independent just an administration ago, and it's amazing to me, Rick, that it changed so rapidly, and that impacts our national security as well.
100%, and that's one of the reasons I love being with the ACLJ, is that we have this holistic look when it comes to energy or human rights and foreign policy and domestic policy. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of being at ACLJ, is that we get to do all sorts of different policies that interact and intermingle. I can't imagine not being a part of ACLJ, not being able to write pieces like what I just did up at aclj.org, to be able to put some of these Biden administration policies into perspective. What does it mean for our domestic audience? What does it mean for our foreign policy audience? How do these affect human rights? And the freedom that I get to be able to write and to speak out at ACLJ is just like no other place. And I'm really appreciative that we can bring together all these issues under one roof.
And we've been trying to do this for people, too, at a time where it's easy to almost ignore the rest of the world because of COVID and because of the situation with travel, and people aren't moving around, and they're kind of just dealing with, crisis after crisis. But it's to make sure they understand, Rick, is that really all of that is happening is impacting you at home. And I think that by bringing you on, having you part of the team, and putting these kind of new perspectives out in articles at aclj.org and bringing you on to kind of explain to everybody, is that always it ties back to right at home.
Yeah, well, that is so true, because just look at this instance in particular of the Biden administration saying that we're not going to help fund foreign countries that don't have clean energy sources. And you might think, oh, well, that's too bad for Bulgaria or Serbia or Kosovo or some other country. But it actually impacts us, because if you work for a company or you live in a state where energy jobs and energy production are a part of your economy, this directly impacts you and your economy.
As we're getting ready to close out this segment, Rick, I want to reiterate something you just said, and that is the unique role that we get to play at the American Center for Law and Justice in all of these policies.
Look, I'm really humbled to be able to be a part of the team. And the only way that we get to be a part of this team, which is a big, when I write a piece, for instance, Jay, you know this, there's an editor that helps edit it to make sure that it's correct. There are a team of people that put it up. There are production people. This is not a cheap endeavor. But if you're hearing our voice, if you're reading the pieces at ACLJ, hopefully people understand that this is something that's expensive, that we need to be able to continue funding, because it's invaluable to me to be able to have a place like ACLJ that allows us to bring perspectives from foreign policy and domestic policy together.
I said this earlier, everybody, and Rick, I really appreciate you saying that. And, you got the former director of national intelligence, who was also ambassador to Germany and had 10 years of experience at the United Nations. And we have the former secretary of state, who also happened to be the director of the CIA. All of that happened this year. Rick, we appreciate your input, your insight, and your being a part of the team. But, Jordan, this goes right back to why it's so important for people to stand with the ACLJ in these last days of the month.
And Rick said, from his perspective, he sees the team that works with him just on the piece going up at ACLJ, making sure the right hyperlinks are there so that you're understanding how this links back to maybe other pieces that have been written or other work that's been done. So you can take that, you learn a lot, but also you can share it with friends and family. And that's not one person. That's not just Rick, and it's not on the broadcast. It's whether you're watching the broadcast, listening to the broadcast, making sure both those things are working at the same time. And we're still just talking about really the production side, all the legal work and policy work that goes into it, all the people involved there. It's because of your financial support of the ACLJ. And we are grassroots organizations based on grassroots level donations, where your $25 donation, your $35 donation, that's the key to keep the ACLJ moving forward and able to grow. In 2 years, even during these pandemics, we've been able to grow because of your financial support. Be part of our matching challenge. You double the impact of your donation. We explained throughout the broadcast. We'll do it again at the end of the show for you at aclj.org today. Coming up next, we have former Secretary of State and, again, Senior Counsel for the ACLJ, Mike Pompeo, joining us.
New threats from Vladimir Putin, surrounded by his generals, demanding that NATO withdraw its troops from Eastern Europe. He says in case Western colleagues continue their clearly aggressive line, we will take adequate military and technical measures in response.
Russia has moved more than 90,000 troops near the Ukrainian border and might go for an invasion.
More than 100,000 troops plus tanks and heavy equipment at the Ukraine border. A buildup that has only increased in the 2 weeks since Putin and President Biden met virtually. Since the president talked to President Putin, it seems as though the buildup is continuing, the threats are continuing from Vladimir Putin.
If Russia continues to engage in reckless or aggressive actions, we will respond, and we'll respond strongly.
Russia has laid out demands in detail. Now, this is an unusual diplomatic move. It says that these demands are not only essential for lowering tensions in Europe, but also for diffusing a crisis in Ukraine.
Among their demands are that the Ukrainians are never allowed to join NATO and that NATO membership is not extended to any other former Soviet countries, not establishing any military bases in any of those countries, and stopping all NATO military activities and drills near Russia. All of those demands are already complete non-starters for NATO, which has already said so, and for the U.S., who say that the alliance's future is only going to be determined by NATO itself.
We're going to put on the table our concern with Russian activities that we believe harm our interests and values. That's the basis of reciprocity upon which you would pursue any kind of dialogue. We can make progress in some areas. In other areas, we're just going to have to disagree, and that's in the nature of dialogue as well. But fundamentally, our strategy is going to be to coordinate closely, to have allied unity, and then be prepared to sit with Russia and respond positively to the idea that we can have a discussion in the appropriate format on the principle of nothing about you without you, and see where it takes us.
Light of the Father, now in fresh
Welcome back to Seculo. Our senior counsel for global affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, joining us now. Secretary Pompeo, I want to jump right into it because we've got the Kremlin's propaganda machine. It's a state-owned news network, so it's owned directly by Russia, not just like affiliated, not friendly, but actually owned by Russia. And the head of the station goes on to talk about the U.S. and Ukraine, and the quote translated is, "We're holding very strong cards in our hands. Our hypersonic weapons are guaranteed to produce a response that is so unpleasant for America to hear, being reduced to radioactive ash." I mean, yeah, you could say it's bluster, but on the other hand, I mean, this is a new era of using nuclear weapons as a threat to America and our allies.
Jordan, you're quite right. That kind of language is relatively unprecedented from an official who is directly connected to a state that has a nuclear capability, the scale and scope that the Russians do, that Vladimir Putin controls. While there's probably some bluster in it, there's probably something going on inside of Russia where that made him say that. We should take seriously the threats, the credible threats that the Russians are presenting, not only the hypersonic weapons to which he referred, but the incredible military buildup that they've placed along Ukraine's eastern border. This is a serious challenge. It's a challenge to the Biden administration. They watched the Bidens give them the New START treaty, a treaty that we were holding out, that we'd said, fine, we're happy to fix this with you, but we need something for it. The Biden administration gave it to them. They then gave them the pipeline in exchange for nothing. They have seen this administration cave time after time, and I think they're convinced that they can get the administration to cave to the demands that Vladimir Putin has laid out. Again, this matters to the American people. This central idea that borders should be respected and sovereignty is important and democracy should be rewarded is something the American people understand impacts them every day. And I hope this administration doesn't allow the Putin team that you quoted from there today displace the central understanding.
Well, this is Jay, Mike, and supposedly the same media outlet and the same spokesperson is saying that Putin has put forward written agreements to NATO, and which he wants guarantees that NATO never expands at any time in the future. The same media host that Jordan quoted said Russia's prepared and handed over to the Americans its written proposals on strategic stability, or more simply, on the prevention of nuclear war, since we are already at a critical point, to be honest. It's simple. The U.S. and NATO must roll back from our borders. Otherwise, we will, figuratively speaking, roll up to their borders and create symmetrical, unacceptable risks. If you put a gun to our head, we will respond in kind. Now, this is the language coming out of a state-controlled media in Moscow.
These voices almost certainly are reflecting what Vladimir Putin intends them to reflect. If that's your point, yes. The state control is real. These are messages that Putin himself intends for Western audiences, probably for his own internal audiences as well. But remember, Jay, he knows Latvia is not going to invade Russia, right? He knows that there's no threat to his homeland. This is what he is proffering when he talks about, well, we can't expand NATO. What's serious and what matters most is that we are clear about the things that we have expectations for. We were working to try and find, Jay, the ACLJ has talked about this before, a good arms treaty makes sense. We were working to find a place with him on these strategic weapon systems, along with the Chinese and their new nuclear-capable programs, but we couldn't get to a place which protected America. I'm afraid that whether it's climate change that is driving it or something else that doesn't protect America's security interests, this administration probably hears those words and is prepared to say, look, we're not prepared to do the right things to protect the things that matter to every American all across our country.
And I think one thing, Secretary Pompeo, that our listeners need to prepare for, but the outside American people, is that it's like Putin is putting in place a possibility where he can blame his invasion of Ukraine, if they take those steps to go further than what they're already doing, on the U.S. and NATO. And he's going to say, I had to do this. It's because of the United States and NATO. And again, people have to be pretty educated on this topic to understand why that's not true.
Yes, Jordan, indeed. Yesterday I saw some reporting that suggested that the Russians were accusing the United States of placing chemical weapon systems inside of Ukraine to create a provocation. The U.S. government did the right thing. They denied it. I'm not privy to all the actions. I am very confident that did not take place. This is classic KGB, Russian, Soviet disinformation designed to make them look like the victim, not the aggressor that they are.
As we look to 2022, just days ahead, what do you see as the most pressing national security issue we're going to face in this new year?
Oh, goodness. The long-term challenge that we'll face right away is continuing to press the Chinese Communist Party. Answers about how we've now had millions of people killed across the world from a virus that escaped from their country. Answers to why they're holding people in the western part of their province and using slave labor and forced sterilizations upon those people. Lots of answers about Chinese Communist Party hegemony. But what's taking place in Vienna and Tehran on these negotiations with the Iranians is also something that is very concerning. The administration has now thrown up their hands. They're turning to blame the Trump administration for the place that they've found themselves in, and it is the kind of place that this administration has found itself before and has not demonstrated resolve. You can tick them off, perhaps starting first and foremost with Afghanistan and the way that they so poorly exited there and caused 13 Americans to be killed.
You know, Mr. Secretary, we've been telling and talking with our donors around the country and those that listen to this broadcast or watch us on television how critical it's been for us to have your expertise as part of our team. And I just want to thank you for being part of the team here at the ACLJ. It makes a huge difference. Your insights are phenomenal, and our ability to take action items because of that is great. So from all of us, thank you for being part of the team here at the ACLJ.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jordan. Bless you. You all have a very Merry Christmas and a good start to the new year as well, sir.
You too.
Merry Christmas. And folks, for all of you, again, just think about these last two. These were live segments, discussions, and the work that we're able to do behind the scenes. What we're able to discuss on air to get you informed at a level where you're not going to click on any cable news outlet and get that much information in 20 minutes. And that's what that was. 20 minutes you had Rick Rennell, not on for 3 minutes, but 11 minutes discussions on issues which might not be, again, enough flashy enough to get on a cable news 3-minute segment. But you've got to understand, because they become the flashy issue real quick when you get an invasion of Russia, Ukraine by Russia, or an invasion of Taiwan by the Chinese. At the same time, we learned that we're cutting off our allies and our energy support. And how we are really dismantling our own standing as a U.S. superpower. But we're able to bring all this to you. Again, it's because of your financial support. This last minute of the broadcast, I told you, I would explain why it's key right now and why it's a great time to donate. It's, of course, the end of the year, and we are working through the end of the year. I know even on the vaccine mandate case, we know the Supreme Court on December 30th has got required briefs from the federal government, may have a response due the next day. So within 2021 still. But, of course, the work into 2022 as well. Support our work at aclj.org. And during our matching challenge, we have a group of donors. They're going to match all the donations that come through this entire month. You can decide that your donation's recurring. Click that box. It can be a one-time donation. If you supported us before and you've thought about supporting us again, it's a great time to do it, because when you click there and you make the donation for $100 to the ACLJ, that triggers a match from a group of donors, and they'll agree to do it, and they donate $100. So you've really brought in $200 to the American Center for Law and Justice. It's simple, it's easy, it's safe and secure. ACLJ.org. Donate today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.